Good evening. It's 5 o'clock on a sunny summer's afternoon in London. One of my sons just arrived from Cayman, his first visit to the UK in 3 years. And I told him to bring eye shades because he won't be used to it getting light at 4 something in the morning. And he also won't be used to it not getting dark till well after 9 o'clock in the evening in midsummer. Because in Cayman, it really doesn't vary terribly much from winter to summer. So it's pitch dark by 7:30 in the evening in the middle of summer. And with that, my guest this week is Kandiah, who is based outside London and is the head of Cayman Connection, and is a Caymanian, has been very connected to supporting Cayman and bridging differences and distances between for Caymanians in the UK and overseas and elsewhere, off island, as we'd say. So welcome, Kate. It's a pleasure to finally get you on.
Thank you. You did finally get me on. I don't know whether you're scraping the barrel a bit for inspiring leaders, but I'm here and I'm proud to be here. So thank you.
Well, so let's just start. Talk a little bit about yourself and where the idea for Cayman Connection came from, how long you've been running it, where it is now. Give the listeners a little bit of a sense of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. So yeah, Cayman Connection now in its 10th year. We'll be celebrating the 10th anniversary next year. We're in our 10th year now. And it's been quite a journey. So you mentioned I'm Caymanian. I'm from the Cayman Islands myself. I've been coming to and from the Cayman Islands from a very early age. So understanding the differences in culture, what it's like to be in an environment that you're not used to, particularly with me, with British parents, there was a feeling that I should sort of be automatically British, which I just didn't feel. And I think there was a lot of intrinsic cultural confusion with me in those early days, and I carried that with me. So I was working with the Cayman Islands Government Office in the UK. Fantastic time, helping. We had a number of students on our database list then, but we do a lot to do with the Cayman Islands in the UK, and through networks, through people, through various individuals who were so keen to be more involved. And we also worked with the Department of Tourism. There just seemed to be just something lacking a bit, something where people could come, people could understand, where they could be with like-minded people, with Caymanians they could network with. And there just wasn't, there were lots of people that wanted to engage, lots of groups and individuals, but nothing kind of holding it all together. So along with the Department of Tourism and the Cayman Islands Government Office in the UK, I set up and founded Cayman Connection with a lovely group of students 10 years ago, talking about what an island network overseas could look like. So it basically developed slowly and surely from then, and it's been a really sort of heartwarming journey as to what it's like for a diaspora, what it's like for people who are traveling overseas for various reasons, and how can we support them, and how can we together as a community encourage each other, support each other. It's been amazing, really amazing.
And certainly, and I was just contacting you the other day about another Caribbean island a few times larger than ours, than our 3 islands, and as with the different networks, as far as you're aware, what we do is really unusual, and this ability to connect, because of course we have the Cayman Islands Government Office in the UK, which is London based, and we don't have a consulate per se, but they act on things like they'll help educate people on passport issues, etc. But there was this massive change propagated by Jennifer Dilbert from the Cayman Islands Government Office about 20 years ago, when Caymanian students were eligible for home fees at universities. And it's now become a lot easier, but a lot of the universities went, no, but you're from overseas. And we had to explain that to them because the law had changed. And we have so many more students now than we might have done 10, 15 years ago. It's almost become the majority. I think it may even be the majority of students don't go to the US and Canada anymore. They go to the UK. Mm-hmm. But, to fast forward to move towards the present, I think it'd be remiss not to talk about what was it like when the pandemic hit 2 years and 3 months ago, because we had this diaspora, and the diaspora students and others, including you and I. But what was it like? Talk us through that, because that was quite the experience for you.
Yeah, that was amazing on so many levels. And I think back to it now, Leading up to the pandemic and the first few years of the organization, when I spoke to people, talking about a global organization and the importance of that, obviously to support each other, but I had mentioned and we talked about crisis communications and what to do in a crisis. And obviously we had the experience through Ivan. At that stage, we didn't have a diaspora network or community network. We all had to pull together and communications were very different then. But leading up...
Just to pause on that, this is because there are non-Caymanians listening to this. Hurricane Ivan was September 11, 2004, and devastated Cayman for months, and there was virtually no communications at that time. So you were working in the government office at the time, so there was that experience. But then fast forward, and
it was a real eye opener, that experience. Fast forward, I had been saying, in times of a crisis, there's a disaster, and that doesn't necessarily just mean one in Cayman. I was thinking one in Cayman or one in one of our various locations. For example, Manchester bombings, terrorist attacks, things where we can communicate with our audience, with our diaspora and our community immediately, knowing who they are, knowing where they are, and get in touch with them. So we had a few smaller cases like that where we were able to say, this is why this is really important. I had no idea what was coming, obviously. And with the pandemic, I mean, it was amazing. I mean, in a sense, Cayman Connection really came into its own during the pandemic, because it was really what it was set up for, supporting each other in a situation where no one can even imagine. So, I mean, I'm so grateful to get to know you better during that time, because I think it was really, although we'd known each other for years, it was really during that time that we got to know each other, and a lot of others in the network who we knew of, but we hadn't been engaging. So it was a really incredible time of ensuring we're getting the right messages across, working with various entities to ensure that we were finding people, if people were finding us, obviously working very closely with the government office to ensure repatriation flights were handled in the best way possible, that the information streams about the next steps, everything was changing so quickly. And as you know, that was very, very challenging, trying to manage and juggle all of those things. But what we really found was that community just wanted to stay in touch and engaged. And when you and I had several meetings about what to do next, and you with the then Cayman Islands government representative, Andre Ebanks, coming up with this idea to do a virtual yard meeting, we call the virtual yard meetings, where we gather once a week and just check in. And so you came to all of the early meetings and really gave us a structure and a format to work with, so that we could really properly, consistently engage with people and be there. So we'd have a system where we check in first. How are you doing? Is there anything that we can do for you? What's your situation? Where are you? And we'd go through certain needs and situations, and then just have a lovely chat. Are you okay? And we were finding that whilst there were some situations of absolute urgent need for varied reasons, I need to get home, or my mother's ill, or, I'm in the Philippines and I don't know where to go, and they're closing the borders around me. So much going on. But under all that is just a human need to connect, and a human need to feel like, despite this is all happening around the world, you are close to people, even if you're not really. And I think that's where it really came into its own.
Let's stick a pin there. There's something to, feel proud of, I think, for us, is that our little island nation was already good at it, because we're in a hurricane belt. We'd had hurricanes in the late 80s and multiple tropical storm warnings over time. But Hurricane Ivan really created so many lessons for Cayman. So Cayman had, a small island of 60 to 70,000 people roughly, had a hazard management unit within the government run by the amazing Danny Coleman, past guest on the show, on the podcast. And but we Caymanians know how to respond in a crisis collectively, and to support individuals, because certain individuals, just the way people function, some people are not great in a crisis. So the government office was absolutely terrific. And I just remember pictures on social media of the representative and the staff at Heathrow, because the flights weren't scheduled for a very long time. They were very infrequent. There were difficulty getting seats, repatriation flights. There were charters, effectively, with the support of British Airways and the governor and the governor's office. So we're very good at that. And it felt really good to be part of the initial setup, where it really was simply, how are you? What do you need? And of course, those conversations could then be taken offline with you, with the government office. But I think that, to me, the pivot point came when we had. Now you can talk about your Cayman Connection podcast in a moment, but the guy who became your host, the incredible King Navassa, who's based up in the Greater Manchester area, and we came up with this mad idea of cooking together on one of the meetings. And huge credit to you, who self-avowedly is not an amazing cook. And I just remember that was a pivot point, because from that point on, it moved a bit more out of crisis management and more into community. And I just love the fact you were able to laugh with yourself, and we all laughed with you. And there was Jevi and King, and you were saying, how much water did I put in when I cooked the rice for the rice and peas? And it's like, or how much rice do I put? And I remember Jevi going, well, you know how much rice your mama puts in? Well, put more than that. You know how much water? Well, put a little bit more than that. And and Kate's just looking at the screen going, I have no idea. But that was such a fun event. And I know you recorded it, but I mean, that should be in the best of Cayman Connection.
We should just throw back on that. That was great fun. It was great fun. And I'm a terrible cook, but that was just. Well,
you made rice and peas. So from that point, it felt like, there's been things started. That was mid 2020, like 2 years ago. But there's been a lot happened since then. So what sort of highlights have there been for you? And now, really, what are you doing? What are you focused on now? Not even so much what are you doing, but what are you focused upon to support community?
Yeah. Well, what we found through engaging with people and people coming on board and the community growing and fun events like that there were varied interests in the community overseas, and how we managed our events and how we did our events changed. We structured things slightly differently, and then we got to know what people wanted. So we had environmental focused events, and we had craft focused events, like you say, cooking as well. And one of the main highlights was leading up from all these events was Cayman Day. So we had the first ever Cayman Day last September in partnership with the Cayman Islands Government Office in the UK. And it was another real pivot for us in terms of getting everybody together in person after 2 years of lockdown. We had forged friendships, really, really close community friendships with people we hadn't actually met in person.
Over Zoom, yeah.
Over Zoom. And then to all be there together. I'm sorry you couldn't make it, actually. It was really sad.
I think I was in Cayman.
Yeah. You were like, yeah, I only Cayman Day in the UK. I'm going back home. The feeling there was just incredible. And for everybody to meet in person, to really regroup and get that energy of life back again after a really difficult time. And then from then on, the feeling with Cayman Connection was very much just that. We're here to support each other. We're here to celebrate each other. We had some great performance acts. We had a Caymanian chef. We had a market stalls. So much that really sort of brought Cayman to the fore and made people feel really at home when they were overseas. In fact, with all the marketing communications, one of my favorite comments through social, I think it was on Instagram somewhere, was someone from Cayman. A lot of people from Cayman were watching all the little videos and things, and they said, is it strange that I'm in Cayman, but I actually want to be there? And we got some great, so that was a real highlight for us, and now is going to be an annual event. We're holding the second one on September the 18th this year as well, so hoping that anyone watching this who's interested in coming along in the UK will do so. So that was a real highlight. And then so what I'm focusing on from that and what I'm pulling out of this is another thing we recognized is how many Caymanians are doing fantastic things overseas. I mean, I know you've been on a number of the calls where we've just been gobsmacked, things on the ground going, you do what?
And I think just to pause before you get into that, you talked about connection and celebration, and you'll move into that. One of the things I want to highlight for people who might be listening to this later back in Cayman is that one of the real learnings has been this still in the first 6 months of the media back in Cayman was, we're helping the students get home, right? But the recognition that we have a really quite significant diaspora in the UK and also in other countries, but the UK is one where there's quite a lot of people because of the natural ties to the UK. We have people doing nursing qualifications. That chef you mentioned is London-based, right? The person leading the dance and the fitness is middle of the UK, middle of England-based. We have a quite amazing diaspora of people who have, for whatever period of time, it might be indefinite, it might be a certain period of years to build their career because of specialisms, but they're Caymanians who don't live in Cayman anymore. So we have the opportunity also to, help them connect backwards and forwards and connect to people in the UK and start changing the message we give. And the one person that came to mind to me, and I didn't understand half what he was saying because it was really complicated, was we had a conversation. We had Dr. Mark Paramlal on there. Now, people in Cayman might know the name Paramlal, right, from the family, the Who You For conversation. But Dr. Mark is absolutely world leading in his specialist clinical field, right? And that's a Caymanian who is one of the very top people in the NHS, serving 60 million people plus, right? And when he talks, people listen. Now, when we listen, we go, "Sounds pretty impressive. No idea what you're talking about." but clearly, you look him up, and you're listening to that and going, "That's really cool. We need to celebrate that kind of stuff and let the people back home know that there are amazing things that Caymanians of all levels of life and career and study are doing in lots of different countries." And I think that's a handy segue for you.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, and little step before where we're getting to is we went then from saying we need to celebrate these people. So that's where we started with King, the Celebrating Caymanians Overseas podcast, which more and more people came out, and then the podcasts are lovely. You really get to the story of those people and how they got to where they're, and what it feels like for them to be a Caymanian overseas, breaking the ground in various areas. And so that's been really, really fantastic. So in doing that, we still felt we need to do more. Is this message getting back to Cayman? Are these people, understanding how appreciated they are for the Cayman Islands globally on the global stage? So then we thought, how can we do this more? And we have now launched this year for the first time the Cayman Connection Making Waves Awards. And we're very, very excited to have 8 different categories of people. The nomination period is now, but ends on Friday. So that's Friday, the 30th of June. So we need to make sure that we get as many nominations as possible for these great new awards. And we've just seen the nominations come through. It's been really incredible already. And so this is again, it's new for us. It's a new initiative, but we are really, you talk about focus, and it's interesting because the focus does change as you grow and you learn and you meet more people quite normally. And this, I think, has been really our focus is to celebrate what wonderful people and Caymankind that we have all over the world, and how that is helpful for Cayman, the islands, but also for each other. And it's that's definitely where the focus is at the moment.
I think it's wonderful because, one of my feelings around Cayman, I mean, you're from Cayman, you went away to, I assume, boarding school quite a young age, etc. So for different reasons, we both have fairly neutral English accents. Mine's because I only moved to Cayman in my early 20s, right? And then I lived there for 27 years, right? So I thought, well, never felt right. I'm not Neil Murray, who's, Scottish, but has the broadest West Bay accent that you'll ever hear. Different people adopt accents, so we don't, but But I traveled around the world in my career, and I felt with Ivan Recovery and other things that Cayman is a place full of world-class people. But in a small island, effectively a colony of the empire, and that legacy still remains in the mind. It's like there is the encouraging belief that we can stand on our own 2 feet, that we can do amazing things, that we can be role models. Somebody was just talking to me. There's one of my guests a few weeks ago, Sasha Romanovich, who leads a charity which got tens of millions of funding from dormant bank accounts.
Wow. Which
I believe is legislation that, so once a bank account's been dormant a certain period, it just returns to the Crown and they decide where to put it. I believe that legislation was put in place in Cayman before it was put in place in the UK. Right, because what do we do with this? And it shouldn't just sit there, because then you have anti-money laundering rules and all this kind of stuff. And as we know, one of the messages we want to change is that Cayman is super compliant around these things. In fact, for British audience, there was a very popular series on the BBC called The Outlaws, written by Stephen Merchant, who's Ricky Gervais's writing partner. And said, "Oh, should we stash this money in the Cayman Islands?" And we've every Caymanian has heard that so many times. He went, "No, you can't put it there. They've got really strict laws. if you want to stash money somewhere, you do it in the UK. We don't really pay attention to that at all, which actually is technically pretty much true. But I veered off. The point I was looking to go back to was that your Making Waves Awards is a way for people in Cayman to recognize that there are amazing things being done by Caymanians, right? And we're talking about Caymanians overseas, but just the recognition that we have people who stand up, and do great and very cool things that should be celebrated. And all of this helps to encourage Cayman overall have a little bit more confidence that we don't need to depend upon people from big countries. We have a lot of experts committed to Cayman, whether they were born there or not, who can really help the country in lots of ways. So that's my soapbox. But I think your Making Waves thing is tremendous. And the deadline is Friday. And you've already tasked me with nominating somebody in the sports category. And I'm going to be nominating young Master Jordan Crooks, who just smashed Cayman records, at least one held by one of the legendary Fraser brothers at the World Championships in Hungary. And he's the fastest freshman in NCAA history in one of the freestyle sprint events. That's faster than Caleb Dressel, who's the world record holder, was as a freshman. So, and he's a product of the program. He's a product of over 30 years of progress, which began really with the Lions Club digging a hole in the ground, which was the only pool we had for about 15 or 20 years.
Amazing.
So,
and it's
back over to you, Story.
Fourfold. Yeah, I mean, it's not only showing what Caymanians are doing on the global stage and helping that sense of confidence, but it's also inspiring new young leaders in Cayman to say, you can do this too. This is not insurmountable. This is a wide world out there, but it can be done. And I think that inspiration factor is really what we're looking at doing as well, to inspire and show that it's, anything's possible. And that then then to connect those people, so they have someone they can actually talk to and mentor with and actually learn more about. Also, what we found, and you learn so much, your eyes get opened when you do new initiatives, that Caymanians are very modest people, yes, and don't tend to celebrate themselves, and get on well with their lives, and Cayman kind, obviously generous, kind, but very modest. And we realized when we were doing the branding and the flyers and everything, we were like, celebrate Caymanians and Caymanians overseas, and we're like, something's strange here. And we realized, it nearly brought a tear to our eyes, we realized that we don't see that word Caymanian big anywhere. And that to me was a real moment of realization. I was like, we don't celebrate that, Caymanians. It's always, something coming, Caymanians were. And, this is what kind of want to shift. So we're shifting more than just, this recognition of people, but actually a whole mindset of why shouldn't we celebrate each other, and bring that whole sort of culture of celebrating each other into everything we do.
It's just occurred to me because, we're 3 islands and very small community, and within our lifetimes the population was 10 to 20,000, and it's radically grown to 60, 70,000. I say 60 to 70 because it grows so fast we can't keep count. But it's a very, I learned this managing and leading businesses in Cayman. It's almost British in a certain way. It's quite passive. People are very quiet, very private, very modest, very humble. So to me, there's also in your branding of the initiative you're doing now, there's the name of it suddenly hit me. It's like, oh, I don't want to make waves. It's like, it just hit me just now when you were talking about putting the word Caymanians up front, and for the listening audience, there were big hands of, the big font size from Kate. But it's about Caymanians, but it's also Caymanians who are making waves. You go, well, is it a good thing to make waves? Well, all of these waves are positive.
All right. Positive waves. Yeah. Actually, branding was interesting. We in the early branding, we had this huge wave, and I was like, actually, that wave's too big. Let's take a small wave. Not too big. Big waves. So it's really interesting, the mindset with all of this. But it's been really, really interesting, fascinating, and enjoyable experience. And I'm looking forward to actually celebrating the people that are winning. So
there's a lot more, and people can look up Cayman Connection. You can join from anywhere. You've got new people on board. You've got one of our leading arts and actresses, Rita Estevanovich, involved with it, and she's awesome. You've got a bunch of volunteers, and you've taken the Cayman Day into regional meetups. You've got active managers in the US and Canada, and there are Caymanians in lots of countries. There's a lot going on, and you've got the Making Waves Award, which is current. You've got the Cayman Day in September, and I know you're still. There's always room for more sponsors to scale it even further.
Clubs.
One of the things I would observe about you is that you've highlighted this one way. I'll say it slightly differently from a different perspective. Is you do things with a context, and the two things you're looking at are connection and celebration, right? And we had crisis, because that's the insurance policy piece. It's like we have a national airline, which really at this stage exists as an insurance policy for crisis. That's its main reason for being, right? It's different. I used to work at Cayman Airways 30 years ago. It was different then. It was about expanding the tourism market. And it still has a part of that. But really, if nobody ever questions the subsidy that goes to that airline, because it will be there when we need it. And Cayman Connection and the government office are there for that. So, connection, celebration, and crisis. I mean, it's there. It's important. But all the connections you've made you've just gone, oh, so-and-so said this, we can do this. We can do a soca session. We can do a fitness February. We can have a book club. And there's all of these things going on via WhatsApp groups, Zooms, and, some in-person stuff, which is great. But broadly, we're so widely spread. We've adopted online from the positives of the pandemic. You've got all this stuff happening. And a lot of it's happened because you've just been open to going, this is working, this isn't working, let's change this, let's do that. So great kudos to you in leading it. What do you see as the next evolution? If you look into your crystal ball just a little distance, what might you do after Cayman Day? What might be the next thing that Cayman, with the context of connection celebration, do you have any idea what might come after that?
Yeah, well, gosh, I have lots of ideas. I could be here all day. But what I really like to see is the network growing. It's obviously growing globally, but a better understanding of the network back home in Cayman, and to have that group in Cayman be ready to support those that are coming back as well. So we feel like we have a lot of attention to our network overseas, and now I kind of want to bring it home, like I do with everything, and really grow that understanding of what Cayman Connection is back home on the island. So everybody, not one person in Cayman doesn't know who Cayman Connection is and what Cayman Connection is.
Well, that will make some waves, Miss Kandiah. That will make some waves. Because I didn't mention that you do have an active and decent sized group of Caymanians who typically as students have been overseas and are now maybe in their mid to late 20s and are building things and mentoring programs for careers and such like. So those who know, but really what you're now talking about, let's make sure everybody knows. And then from that, new connections and new will be made, and who knows where it goes from there. But that's a strategic piece. You want everybody in Cayman to know. Cayman Connection is the conduit, right? But they want to know about Cayman Connection, therefore that there are Caymanians they can connect to and overseas in lots of different ways. So absolutely fantastic. And we've both been talking quite fast, as I only realized when we're on the podcast, we're both quite fast talkers. Yeah. But we've got covered an awful lot of ground in half an hour. It's been an absolute pleasure, and there's a lot in there for people to listen back to. And we have a global audience on this podcast, but we're focusing on Caymanians in Cayman and elsewhere in the world. What sort of closing remarks or messages might you have for them?
Be kind and stay connected and engage, because you can get so much out of that. We haven't even touched on mental health, but being kind to each other, celebrating each other and connecting can do a world of good individually and as a group. So that's what I would say. Stay connected and get in touch.
So you started out on this podcast, and I didn't catch you in it, which I have done before in our one-to-one conversations. You started out minimizing your impact as an inspiring leader. I hope you listen to this podcast back and rethink that. Thank you for inspiring me, and I'm sure you through your words today and your actions leading the network, your kindness, your connection, and your celebrating of Caymanians, you yourself inspire yourself and others. So thank you so much for being my guest today, Kate.
Thank you, Tom.